Caleb Reyes counted out 3 crumpled dollar bills on the county clerk's folding table and slid them across without looking up. Because he already knew what the people behind him were doing, he could feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives. And he had decided before he walked into that auction that he was not going to give anyone in Mesquite Flats. Sonora, the satisfaction of seeing him flinch. If you believe that the land we are meant to stand on has a way of holding our name long after everyone else has forgotten it, subscribe to this channel right now and turn on the bell so you don't miss a single story. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from tonight. He had driven 6 hours from Tucson with his 2 daughters asleep in the back seat and exactly 1 lead. A property listing, 3 lines long, that had appeared in an online county database for a parcel in the Sierra Madre foothills outside Mesquite Flats. A single-room cabin of indeterminate age. No utilities. No recorded ownership since 1986. On 2 hectares of rocky high desert terrain with a dry creek and a stand of mesquite so old the trunks had gone silver. The listing had 1 photograph. In the photograph, above the caved-in doorframe, barely visible under 30 years of weathering, were 2 letters carved into the lintel. R.V. Reyes Vargas. His grandfather's initials. Caleb's father, Domingo Reyes, had died when Caleb was 11, leaving behind a carpenter's tools, a pickup truck with 200,000 miles on it, and a story he had never quite finished telling. The story was about land. About a cabin in the Sonoran Sierra that had belonged to Caleb's grandfather Rodrigo, a man Caleb had never met because Rodrigo had disappeared before Caleb was born. And Caleb's grandmother on that side, a woman named Petra, had died, everyone said, not long after. Domingo had talked about the cabin the way people talk about things they grieve without knowing why, sideways, in pieces, never the whole of it at once. He said his father had built it with his own hands from Sierra stone and timber he milled himself. He said there was something underneath it that mattered, though he was a boy when he left and couldn't remember clearly. He said his uncles, his father's brothers, had taken everything after Rodrigo vanished and told Domingo and his mother to be grateful they were allowed to leave. Caleb had carried that story the way you carry something heavy that has no handle. He'd carried it through his mother's death when he was 19, through a marriage that lasted 7 years and ended without cruelty but also without warning, through the raising of Luca, who was 9, and Sofa, who was 6, in a rented house in Tucson where the landlord raised the rent every January and the girls shared a room with a window that stuck. He had a job doing finish carpentry, which he was good at, and a savings account that did not grow fast enough, and the listing with the photograph had appeared on a Thursday evening when he was sitting at the kitchen table after the girls were asleep and he was tired in the specific way that has nothing to do with the body. He had stared at the photograph for a long time. Then he called his boss, arranged 3 days off, woke the girls at 4 in the morning, and drove. The auction was held outdoors, beside the county land office, on a morning in October when the Sonoran sky was the color of old turquoise and the air smelled of mesquite, smoke, and coming cold. There were 11 people ahead of him in the small crowd, most of them ranchers, and one man in a company vest with a logo Caleb didn't recognize. The cabin came up 7th. When the auctioneer read the address, Camino Reyes Vargas, parcel 14, Caleb felt something move in his chest like a compass needle swinging to find north. The man in the company vest bid first. $20, then $50, spoken with the casual authority of someone spending someone else's money. Caleb bid $3. The man in the vest turned and looked at him the way professionals look at amateurs, not unkindly, but with a certainty that is almost the same thing as unkind. The ranchers nearby exchanged glances. A woman with a clipboard pressed her lips together in what might have been a smile. $3, the auctioneer said. Do I hear $4? The man in the vest looked at the parcel description again, looked at the photograph on the listing sheet, shook his head slightly and dropped his paddle. $3. Going once, going twice. In the back of the truck, Luca and Sofa were eating cereal from a thermos cup and watching through the windshield. Sold. The laughter was not loud. It was the quiet kind, murmured, passed sideways from one person to another, which is sometimes harder to bear than the loud kind, because it doesn't give you anything obvious to stand against. Caleb signed the transfer paper with his father's carpenter's pen, the one he'd carried since he was 11, and walked back to the truck without hurrying. "Did we win?" Sofa asked. "We did," Caleb said. "What did we win?" He looked at the parcel sheet in his hand. "I'm not sure yet. The cabin was 40 minutes up a dirt road that his truck handled badly in 2 places and barely managed in a third. When they reached it, Luca got out first and stood looking at it with her arms crossed and the expression of a 9-year-old who is deciding whether to be honest. "It's very small," she said. "It is," Caleb agreed. "The roof has a hole. Part of a roof. Papa." "I know." He stood beside her and looked at it too. The cabin was smaller than the photograph had made it seem, which was an achievement given how small it had seemed in the photograph. The walls were Sierra stone, dry stacked and mortared, and they had held better than the roof. The doorframe was intact, and above it, clear now that he was close, the initials RV had been cut deep into the lintel with deliberate care. Not scratched, not etched, but chiseled, the way you mark something you intend to last. He put his hand on the letters. Behind him, Sofa had found the old tin coffee pot still sitting on the iron stove inside, which she reported as though it would treasure. Luca came to look and amended this to almost treasure, which was, Caleb thought, a reasonable position. They camped that first night in the truck with the heater running, the girls in sleeping bags in the back and Caleb in the front seat with the parcel documents and his phone flashlight, and the particular alertness of a man sleeping somewhere new. Around 2 a.m, he got out and stood in the cold Sonoran dark and listened to the Sierra be quiet. He was still there when he heard the screen door of the structure 60 meters down the slope, a structure he had not noticed in daylight, half swallowed by mesquite growth, open and close. She came up the slope in the gray pre-dawn carrying a pot wrapped in a dish towel and moving with the careful steadiness of someone very old who has decided that careful steadiness is not the same as slow. She was small and dark, with white hair pulled back and the kind of face that has been through enough weather that it has stopped being affected by more of it. She wore a dark rebozo over a house dress and garages on feet that navigated the rocky slope without hesitation. She stopped 6 feet from Caleb and looked at him the way people look at something they have been waiting for without being certain it would come. "You bought the cabin," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" The initials on the door. R.V. Reyes Vargas. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved across her face that he couldn't read in the low light. "What is your name?" she said. "Caleb. Caleb Reyes." "My father was Domingo Reyes. His father was Rodrigo Vargas," she said, very quietly. "Rodrigo Vargas. Yes, ma'am." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Come inside. The girls can sleep." "This is going to take a while." Her name, she said, was Ciora Mendez. She had lived in the structure down the slope for 11 years, since her hip had made the walk to the village too difficult. Before that, she had lived in the village, and before that, a very long time ago, in a place she did not name immediately. She made coffee in a clay pot on a wood stove and put 2 cups on the table without asking if he wanted any, and told him about the cabin the way someone tells a story they have rehearsed, not because it isn't true, but because they have needed to be ready to tell it for a long time. Rodrigo Vargas had built the cabin in 1954. He had registered the land grant in 1956. He had two brothers, Flix and Arnulfo, who had always resented the grant because Rodrigo was the youngest and the land had come to him through their mother's side, which the brothers considered an irregularity that the law had handled incorrectly. When Rodrigo disappeared in 1974, the Señora paused here and smoothed the tablecloth with one hand and continued. The brothers had moved quickly. They presented documents to the county land office suggesting the grant had lapsed. They sold the property to a development company in 1986. The development company had gone bankrupt in 1991. The land had reverted to county holding, and there it had sat until an updated land inventory this year had flagged it for auction. Why did Rodrigo disappear? Caleb said. The Señora looked at her coffee cup. Because Flix told him that if he didn't leave, something would happen to his wife and his son. Caleb's hands were still on the table. His son was my father. Yes. And his wife? What Caleb was about to discover, neither of them had fully imagined in the long, cold hours before the Sonoran dawn. She looked up at him. Her eyes, in the wood stove light, were the same dark brown as his father's eyes in the one photograph Caleb owned. His wife, she said, slowly, did not die when everyone said she did. Her name was not Señora Mendez. Her name was Petra Vargas, ne Petra Luisa Fuentes de Vargas, and she was 83 years old, and she was Caleb's grandmother. And she had spent 49 years being dead to a family that had driven her husband away and taken her son and told her that disappearing was the price of their safety. She had hidden in plain sight, different name, different village, then the hillside. She had watched the cabin from 60 meters away for 11 years, knowing what was underneath it, waiting for the person who would arrive with the right name and the right reason. She reached into the pocket of her house dress and put something on the table between them. A compass, brass, round, the size of a silver dollar, with RV, engraved on the back in the same hand that had chiseled the lintel. The needle swung once and settled. He left it with me when he went, she said. He said to give it to Domingo when Domingo was old enough. But Domingo died before you could. Yes. Caleb picked up the compass, held it, felt the weight of it, which was not heavy, but which was the right weight for something that had waited this long. There's something under the cabin floor, Petra said. Rodrigo put it there before he left. He told me what it was. I never went in because... She stopped. Started again. Because I wanted it to be you who went in. Or Domingo. Someone who was his. They went in together in the early morning with a lantern Petra kept on her shelf and a short-handled spade from her lean-to. The trapdoor was in the northeast corner, under 30 years of settled earth. It took Caleb 40 minutes to clear it. The tunnel beneath was shored with mesquite timber, dry and solid, and at its end, in a chamber that smelled of stone and old time, on a shelf at eye height, was a rolled canvas tied with leather cord. Inside the canvas, the original land grant, notarized, stamped, dated 1956. 42 hectares. Rodrigo Vargas, sole grantee. Beneath it, a child's drawing on yellowed paper, a house with mountains behind it, and two figures in front, one tall and one very small, labeled in a child's handwriting, my papa and me. Domingo, age 7, before everything. And beneath that, a single sheet of paper in Rodrigo's handwriting, addressed to no one specific, and therefore to everyone. This land was earned. It will go to whoever has the patience to wait for what is right. I am sorry I could not stay. I loved you all the way to the end of myself. R. Petra stood at the entrance to the tunnel and did not come in. But when Caleb came out with the canvas under his arm and the compass in his hand, she was there, and she held out her arms the way people hold out their arms when they have been waiting to do exactly that for a very long time, and Caleb, who had not been held by a grandmother since the age of 5 when his mother's mother passed, stepped into them without thinking. Because some things the body knows before the mind does. Behind them, at the cabin door, Luca and Sofa stood watching. Sofa was still holding the old tin coffee pot. The legal process took 8 months, which is fast for land disputes and slow for everything else. The original grant was authenticated by the State Land Office in Hermosillo. The 1986 sale was found to have been executed with forged lapse documents. Flix and Arnulfo Vargas were both deceased, but their estate claims were nullified. The development company that had bought the land and resold portions of it received a formal finding of encumbered title, which meant the resort project permitted on the northern 40 hectares was suspended pending resolution. Caleb's lawyer, a woman from Hermosillo named Licenciada Palomares, who specialized in land restitution and who had told him on their first call that cases like his were the reason she had gone into law, said the final resolution would restore full title to the original grant parcel and likely result in compensatory damages from the county for the improper 1986 transfer. In the meantime, Caleb fixed the roof. He had the skills, he had the time, on weekends and 3 weeks of accumulated leave. Petra showed him where Rodrigo had kept his tools, in a cache beneath the lean-to floor that had outlasted everything else. A hand saw, a mallet, 3 chisels, a level that still read true. Caleb used them. It felt correct to use them. Luca and Sofa spent those weekends on the hillside with Petra, who taught Luca to make tortillas on the wood stove and taught Sofa every name of every plant on the slope, which Sofa wrote in a notebook with her tongue between her teeth. Petra called them Mis Nias from the second weekend onward, and the girls called her Abuela Petra from the third, and no one had to arrange any of that. It simply settled into place the way things settle when they belong. The man in the company vest had come back once in the second month, with a different lawyer and a different offer. Caleb met him on the slope in his work clothes, with a chiseling tool still in his hand from the wall repair. He listened to the offer. He said no. The man looked at the cabin, roof repaired, walls repointed, wood smoke rising from the chimney Caleb had rebuilt stone by stone, and then looked at Caleb and seemed to understand that the conversation was finished. He left. He did not come back. In November, on a Sunday afternoon, when the Sierra light came in low and gold through the repaired window and the smell of Petra's coffee filled the single room, Caleb set the compass on the shelf he had built above the stove, beside the child's drawing in its new frame. The tin coffee pot stood next to it. The girls had decorated the shelf's edge with small stones they'd collected from the dry creek, each one different. Luca looked at the shelf for a while. "Is this ours now?" she said. "For real?" "For real," Caleb said. "Even the tunnel?" "Even the tunnel." She thought about that. "Good," she said, with the complete satisfaction of someone for whom a thing has been properly settled, and went back to her book. Sometimes the people we were told were gone are not gone. They are waiting, at the distance that keeps everyone safe, for the one who will finally come with the right name and enough of their people's patience to find them. Has someone you thought you'd lost forever ever found their way back to you? Not the way you expected, but exactly when you needed them? If this story stayed with you tonight, leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who needs to remember that what is ours has a way of holding on, even when we can't. Until the next story. And never underestimate the quiet inheritance waiting in the things your people buried, not out of shame, but out of faith that someone worthy would eventually come to dig.